You are watching Shadoween, where the stories are real, and the fear is too. I honestly had to take a minute before I could even start recording this first one. It's called The 8-Hour Stare, and it feels way too real for me. I was down to my last $40, and the light bill was 3 weeks overdue, so I was scrolling through those labor ads on Craigslist. You know, the ones that look like a bot wrote them. Most of them are just scams, or guys wanting you to move concrete for $5 an hour. But then I saw this one. It just said, Observation Specialist, $600 per shift, cash at end. No experience, no resume, just an address in this this industrial park on the edge of town, near that old meatpacking plant that smells like wet pennies. I emailed the guy, and he just sent back a thumbs up emoji and a time, 10 p.m. I got there, and the place was this squat, windowless brick box. There was this guy standing out front, smoking a cigarette that smelled like burning hair. He didn't even ask my name. He just handed me a clip-on badge that was blank and a laminated sheet of paper. He told me the money was in an envelope on the desk inside, and that if I left before 6 a.m., he'd find me. He didn't say it like a threat, more like a fact, like the sky is blue. He had this weird yellow stain on his thumb, and he kept clicking his tongue against his teeth. I remember thinking about how I really needed a new pair of sneakers because the sole of my left one was flapping, and that $600 would buy a lot of Nikes. The room inside was it was a white room. Fluorescent lights that hummed so loud it made the back of my teeth ache. One desk, one chair, and a heavy iron door with a small circular glass window about the size of a dinner plate. The rules on the sheet were simple. Rule 1, do not look away from the window for more than 10 seconds. Rule 2, if the humming stops, hum to yourself until it starts again. Rule 3, if you see hair coming through the bottom of the door, do not step on it. Rule 4, ignore the scratching. I sat down. The envelope was there. $600 bills, crisp and smelling like a bank. I felt rich. I looked through the little window. It was just a dark hallway on the other side. Nothing happened for like 2 hours. I spent the time thinking about how I was going to buy a steak dinner the next day, and how my mom was always nagging me to get a real job with benefits. My back started hurting because the chair was one of those hard plastic ones from a middle school. I found a half-eaten bag of Cheetos in the desk drawer and ate them even though they were stale and tasted like cardboard. Around 1 a.m., the humming stopped. It was so quiet I could hear my own heart thumping in my ears like a drum. I started humming The Star-Spangled Banner because it was the only thing I could think of. My voice sounded thin and shaky. Then, the scratching started. It wasn't like a dog or a cat. It sounded like someone was taking a long, jagged fingernail and dragging it slowly down the other side of the door. Scrape. Scrape. I kept my eyes on the window. I didn't want to look, but I had to. And that's when I saw it. This eye. Just one eye, pressed right up against the glass. It didn't have a lid. It was just this huge, bloodshot sphere of white and a tiny pinprick pupil. It didn't blink. It just stared back at me. I wanted to scream, but I remembered the rules. I kept humming. I hummed until my throat was raw. The eye stayed there for 4 hours. 4 hours of staring into this thing that wasn't human. At one point, I looked down and saw these long, black strands of hair, oily, smelling like a stagnant pond, creeping out from under the door. They were twitching like they were looking for something. I pulled my feet up onto the chair and hugged my knees. My left foot fell asleep, and it felt like 1,000 needles were poking it, but I didn't move. I just stared at the eye and hummed, "Happy birthday," over and over. When the sun finally came up, or at least when my watch said 6 a.m., the eye just slid away. The humming started back up. I didn't wait. I grabbed the envelope and ran. I didn't even look for the guy outside. I just ran until I hit the main road. I still have the money. I haven't spent it. It's sitting in my dresser, under my socks. Because every time I touch it, I feel like that eye is watching me from the corner of the room. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time since then. I keep thinking I hear that scratching on my bedroom door. I'm really struggling to get through these tonight. But this next entry, "Don't open the freezer in apartment 4B, was sent in by someone who says they still can't go near a grocery store. I do this app called Quick Task. It's basically like Uber, but for random chores. Clean a garage, pick up a cake, whatever. I was behind on my car payment, and the repo man was already circling my block in his greasy truck. So when a task popped up for emergency bio-clean at $1,200 for 2 hours, I swiped so fast I nearly cracked my screen. The location was this crumbling apartment complex in the bad part of the city. The kind where the elevators smell like stale beer and the hallways are lit by flickering orange bulbs. I met a guy in the lobby who looked like he hadn't slept since the 90s. He gave me a key and a bucket of stuff that smelled like industrial-grade bleach and something sweet, like rotting peaches. He told me the title of the job was basically the only rule. Don't open the freezer in apartment 4B. He said, just scrub the walls and the floor. If you hear a thumping inside the fridge, just whistle. Don't look in the freezer. If you do, I can't pay you, and I can't help you. I went up. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no pictures, just a thick layer of gray dust and these weird, dark stains on the linoleum in the kitchen. I started scrubbing. I'm a simple guy. I like things to be clean. So I actually got into it. I was thinking about how I needed to buy a new wiper blade for my car, because the current one just squeaks and smears the rain. The stain on the floor was weird, though. It was sticky, like syrup. And no matter how much bleach I used, it kept coming back. I'd scrub it white, and 5 minutes later, a little bead of black liquid would seep up through the floorboards. Then the fridge started. It was an old yellowing thing that rattled like it had a loose motor. But the sound wasn't a rattle. It was a thud. A heavy, fleshy thud. Like someone was hitting the inside of the door with a ham. Thud. 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 I started whistling. I don't even know any songs, so I just whistled one high note over and over. My mouth was dry, and my tongue felt like a piece of suede. The thumping got louder. The whole fridge started walking across the floor, inch by inch, vibrating with the force of whatever was inside. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing the baseboards, trying not to look at the freezer door. But the door had this little gap in the seal, and out of that gap, this stuff started leaking. It looked like gray slush, but it was moving. It was crawling down the front of the fridge like a colony of ants. It smelled so bad I threw up in my bucket. It smelled like a locker room and a grave. I kept whistling, my chest tight, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to leave, but I thought about my car. I thought about how I'd have to walk to my mom's house in the rain if the car got taken. Suddenly, the whistling wasn't enough. The freezer door handle started to turn. It was one of those old-school latches. Click, click, click. I jumped up and threw my weight against the door. I could feel something on the other side. It felt cold. Not like ice, but like the absence of heat. It was pushing back. I was screaming at this point, just no, 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 and pushing with everything I had. The handle was turning under my hand, and I could hear a voice. It wasn't coming from the freezer. It was coming from inside my head. It was my own voice, but it was saying things I didn't know. Words that sounded like wet gravel. The 2 hours ended. The guy from the lobby walked in. He didn't even look at me. He just handed me a stack of 20s and told me to get out. I didn't even take my bucket. I ran out of there, and I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away. When I got home, I checked the money. It was covered in that same gray slush. I washed it in the sink, but the smell wouldn't go away. I ended up spending it on the car, but now the car smells like it. Every time I turn on the AC, I smell apartment 4B. And sometimes, when I'm sitting in traffic, I hear a thud coming from my trunk. I'm too scared to check it. I just keep the radio loud. This next one, I don't even know how to introduce. The third floor escort policy. It's just, I've never liked malls. I took a job as a night security guard at the Regency Mall. You know the place. It's that dead mall near the highway that still has a Fountain of Youth store and a shuttered Sears. It's mostly just elderly walkers during the day and nothing at night. My supervisor was this guy named Bill, who had a permanent mustard stain on his tie and breathed through his mouth. He took me to the security office, which was just a closet full of old monitors, and gave me the night protocol binder. He flipped to a page highlighted in neon pink. The third floor escort policy, he said. Read it. Memorize it. If you fail, don't bother calling me because I won't answer. The rules were bizarre. The third floor was mostly empty offices and a defunct food court. The policy said that if I was patrolling the third floor and I saw a woman in a red dress looking at the directory, I had to offer to escort her to the exit. I wasn't allowed to look at her feet.
I wasn't allowed to answer if she asked me what time it was. And if she stopped walking, I had to keep walking and not turn around until I reached the service elevator. I thought it was a prank. Bill seemed like the type of guy who would mess with the new guy. I spent my first few hours walking the first and second floors, shining my flashlight into the empty storefronts. I was thinking about how I wanted to go home and play some video games, and how I had a headache from the cheap coffee in the break room. The mall was so quiet that the sound of my own boots on the tile sounded like gunshots. It's a lonely feeling, being in a place built for thousands of people, when it's just you and the mannequins. Around 3 a.m., I went to the third floor. The escalator was broken, so I had to walk up the steps, which creaked under my weight. I reached the top and shined my light around. The food court was a graveyard of plastic tables and chairs. And there, standing by the big directory map, was a woman. She was wearing a red dress. It was a bright cherry red that seemed to glow in the dark. My heart skipped a beat. I remembered the policy. I walked up to her, keeping my eyes firmly on her waist. "Ma'am," I said, my voice cracking, "the mall is closed. May I escort you to the exit?" She didn't say anything. She just started walking. I followed her. We walked past the empty Hallmark and the darkened Claire's. I made sure not to look at her feet, but I could hear them. They didn't sound like shoes on tile. They sounded like wet meat hitting the floor. Slap, squish, slap, squish. I felt a drop of sweat roll down my neck. I was focusing on a loose thread on the back of her dress, just to keep my eyes from wandering. "Do you have the time?" she asked. Her voice was beautiful, like a singer's, but there was an echo to it, like she was speaking into a metal bucket. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. My knees were shaking so bad, I thought I was going to collapse.
We were passing the old cinema when she suddenly stopped. She just froze. I felt the air around us get cold, so cold I could see my breath. I wanted to stop. Every instinct in my body told me to check if she was okay. But rule 3, if she stops walking, keep walking. I kept going. I didn't look back. I felt her eyes on the back of my neck. It felt like 2 hot coals pressing into my skin. I reached the service elevator and hit the button. I stood there, staring at the closed doors, waiting for them to open. I could hear the slap-squish sound getting closer. It was right behind me. I could smell her. She smelled like lilies and old copper. I didn't turn around. The elevator opened. I stepped in, and I mashed the button for the lobby. As the doors were closing, I saw a reflection in the silver metal of the elevator wall. Just for a second. The woman wasn't a woman. She was too tall. Her arms were too long, and where her face should have been, there was just a smooth, pale surface with no eyes or mouth. I quit the next morning. I didn't even go back for my last paycheck. I've been working at a gas station now. It sucks, and the pay is garbage, but at least there's no 3rd floor. I still don't wear anything red. I even threw out my favorite red flannel shirt. Sometimes, when I'm at the register and the store is empty, I hear that slap-squish sound coming from the back of the aisles. I just turn up the radio and pretend I don't hear it. Moving on to a really disturbing one titled The Mourner for Hire. This one is just plain wrong. I was broke. Like eating ramen with a fork I found in the trash, broke. I found a gig on a specialized job board for professional attendees. The description was vague. Attend a private ceremony. Maintain a somber demeanor. $2,000 for 4 hours. I didn't care if it was a cult or a weird funeral. $2,000 was a year of rent for me. I called the number, and a woman with a voice like sandpaper told me to meet her at a funeral home out in the middle of nowhere, past the old cornfields where the crows congregate. She told me I had to wear a specific suit. It was black, made of some heavy, itchy wool that felt like it was woven from spider webs. She gave me a set of instructions. Don't speak to the other mourners. If the guest of honor moves, do not point it out. If the music stops, close your eyes, and don't open them until you hear the bell. And most importantly, if anyone asks you how you knew the deceased, tell them you met him in the Garden of Shadows. The funeral home was old. It had that heavy, oppressive smell of lilies and formaldehyde. There were about 10 other people there, all dressed in the same itchy suits. They all looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and pale, waxy skin. None of us looked at each other. I sat in the third row. The casket was open at the front. I couldn't see who was inside from where I was sitting, and I didn't want to. I was just thinking about how my head ached because I hadn't had any caffeine that day, and how there was a coffee stain on my tie that I hoped no one would notice. The service started, but there was no priest. Just a man at an organ playing a song that didn't have a melody. It was just a series of low, vibrating notes that made my stomach churn. About an hour in, I heard a sound from the front. A dry, rustling sound, like dead leaves blowing across a sidewalk. I looked up, and I saw a hand, gray, long-fingered, with nails that looked like yellow horn, grip the edge of the casket. The guest of honor was sitting up. I froze. My heart was thumping so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. None of the other mourners moved. They just sat there with their heads bowed. The thing in the casket turned its head. It didn't have a face like ours. It was just skin stretched tight over bone, with holes where the nose and eyes should be. It made a sound like a wet sigh. I wanted to run, but I remembered the $2,000. I needed that money. I forced myself to stay in my seat. Then the music stopped. The silence was absolute. I closed my eyes immediately. I could hear it. The thing was getting out of the casket. I heard its feet hit the floor. Thud, thud. And then that rustling sound again. It was walking down the aisle. I could feel it passing me. It smelled like old earth and something metallic. It stopped right next to my chair. I could feel its breath on my ear. It was cold. So cold it felt like ice. "How did you know him?" it whispered. The voice sounded like wind through a graveyard. "I met him in the Garden of Shadows," I said. My voice was a tiny, pathetic whimper. The thing stayed there for what felt like an hour. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move a muscle. I just sat there, smelling the earth and feeling the cold. Then a bell rang. A sharp, clear ding. I opened my eyes. The thing was gone. The casket was closed. The other mourners were standing up and leaving. The woman with the sandpaper voice met me at the door and handed me an envelope. I got home and counted the money. It was all there. But there was something else in the envelope. A small, dried-up piece of something that looked like skin. And on it, written in what looked like charcoal, was my name. I've tried to throw it away, but it always ends up back in my wallet. I don't go out much anymore. I lost a lot of weight because food doesn't taste like anything. I just sit in my apartment and wait for the bell to ring. I know it's going to ring eventually, and I know who's going to be on the other side of the door when it does. Subscribe to Shadoween,